Welcome to our webinar on business opportunities with development banks today. During the next 2.5 hours, you will learn from two of the most important regional development banks, namely the Asian Development Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, how they work with the private sector, which business opportunities they offer, and what upcoming projects they have in their pipeline. My name is Michael Zimmermann, and I'm Austria's Private Sector Liaison Officer for Development Banks. And within Advantage Austria of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, I'm responsible for export finance and sustainable business. Before I hand over to our first speaker, let me say a big thank you for all our international speakers. We know that these times are very hectic for all of you, and we appreciate it that you take the time out of your busy calendars to brief our companies. So let's start with the topic of today. Our first part is the Business Opportunities Seminar with the Asian Development Bank, and I'm very happy that we have 4 distinguished speakers joining us from ADB headquarters in Manila today. I would like to welcome Mr. Rustam Abdukayumov. He's the Director of Procurement Division 2 of ADB, and he's in charge also for Procurement, Portfolio and Financial Management Department. And he oversees the procurement and consulting services of the operations in East Asia, Southeast Asia and Pacific countries. Rustam has been with ADB for 19 years, and he has a large experience with big projects, including working on complex turnkey civil works and supply contracts in the fields of irrigation, transport, urban and energy sectors. So I would now like to ask Rustam to switch on his microphone and his camera for his introductory remarks. Rustam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning to our colleagues in Austria, and good day to our colleagues from ADB. First of all, I would like to welcome all our participants to this virtual business opportunities seminar, and I would like to thank our host organization, Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, for helping us in organizing this event. I just wanted to briefly touch upon the objective of this seminar. For those of you who had already prior experience working with ADB, you may know that every year during the last 10 years, ADB had organized so-called Business Opportunities Fair in Manila. This was a big forum for consultants, contractors, manufacturers, suppliers, and other interested parties in providing goods, work, and services for ADB projects. So these forums were also a good opportunity for networking with ADB staff and to learn about business opportunities with ADB. So last year in 2019, we have conducted very big business opportunities fair in Manila, which was attended by more than 1,000 participants from different countries. So this year we were planning to organize a similar big event, but not in Manila, maybe in one of our regions where ADB operates, but unfortunately due to disruptions caused by COVID-19 and associated travel restrictions, we had to postpone this event to a later date, and we will be assessing the situation with the travel in the first quarter of 2021, and then we'll start exploring options for conducting the business opportunities fair in 2021. But nevertheless, we always wanted to continue our engagement with the consultants, contractors, manufacturers, and all parties who are interested to work with ADB. So this year we decided to conduct such business opportunity seminars virtually. And although unfortunately it will not be possible for participants to meet in person with ADB staff, as was done during Business Opportunities Fair in Manila, we hope that we'll be still able to share relevant information with you so that you have a better understanding about ADB's operations and available opportunities. So actually, after this pandemic started, and we basically started working from home, we have already conducted 15 business opportunities seminars virtually, which were attended by more than 1,600 participants. We are also currently working on enhancing ADB's business outreach website to provide more information and describe opportunities available under projects that are aimed at addressing COVID-related issues. Just for your information, we are planning to organize another very big virtual event on October 29 at 4 p.m. Manila time. We have already informed the board of directors, and we will have also published the information on ADB website about this event, and we have a registration link available there. So we are encouraging all participants to also register for this event, because here we will update on the most recent ADB initiatives in terms of preparation of traditional projects, but also those which are related to addressing COVID impact. I think it would be a very interesting event because we have invited some participants from the private sector who are dealing with those serious issues that were caused by COVID on a daily basis. They're implementing contracts. There are consultants and contractors who will be sharing their experience on how to cope with the COVID-related issues. So therefore, I am encouraging all participants to register to this event as well. Today's event, at your request, will focus on ADB's operations covering two interrelated topics or two sectors, which is energy and climate change. And I am pleased to briefly introduce our speakers. Two of them are representing ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. These are Kee-Yung, our Principal Energy Specialist, and Virender Duggal, Principal Climate Change Specialist. So they will be presenting ADB's initiatives and priorities in these two broad areas. So following that, Glen Harris, our Senior Procurement Specialist, will present ADB's procurement framework and procedures for procurement of goods, work, and consulting services, which I hope is of interest to you. And we'll also share information with you on how to find business opportunities under ADB projects. So our aim is to continue collaboration with the business communities around the world, despite the new challenges caused by the pandemic. So we value our cooperation with business partners because you are very useful for ADB in terms of preparation and implementation of ADB finance projects. All projects ADB finances will involve certain inputs from private sectors, either in the preparation stage or in implementation stage. So therefore, I hope that you will find this event useful and that you will be able to have more information about ADB's operation. And finally, I hope that you will be able to win contracts under ADB projects. So thank you very much, and thank you for organizers to help us organize this big event. And now I would like to hand over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Rustam. I think that's why we are here today, to help companies participate in projects and win contracts. As Rustam already announced, our next speaker is Dr. Kee-Yung. He's the Principal Energy Economist, and he's working in the field of sustainable development and climate change within ADB. So I would now like to ask Kee-Yung to switch on his camera and microphone. He is in charge for the development of the energy sector strategies and policies, and advises also in the formulation of the energy sector lending, which is very important for ADB because it roughly makes up 1/4 of ADB financing. And I think Kee-Yung also has some connects to Austria, because before joining ADB, He worked for the International Atomic Energy Agency and for UNIDO. So Kee-Yung, I hope he's already with us, switching on his camera and his microphone. He will tell us about ADB's energy sector operations, which had a volume of $2.4 billion last year. And what is especially interesting, what he will speak about, is the projects that are upcoming. So Kee-Yung, I just heard he will be with us via microphone. So the camera is not connected, but we will hear him. So please, Kee-Yung, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here, and from this business opportunity seminar, in particularly for Austria. Like Mikhail was mentioning that that I used to live for long in Vienna and worked for the 20 years in the UNIDO agency and as well as in the IASA, and before I moved to ADB, and so. I'm also now based in Vienna doing work from home. So, this is my pleasure to do. So on behalf of the energy sector group, so to say, from the ADB side, that, I would like to give you some brief presentation on what we do in terms of energy sector. Okay, so energy sector operations in the ADB, energy sector operation means that this is not only the, investment, but it also applies to the guarantee grants and also technical assistance. We are operating everything in terms of this is 3 guiding principle, and this is to meet, so to say, the global commitment, such as the SDG goal 7 and 13 for the climate change from the energy side, but mostly on the universal energy access and the SDG goal 7. And obviously that, also the global climate goals with the NDCs, but all this is the link to the, recently approved, which is ADB strategy 2030 with its 7 operational priorities. So what is a principle that we are following is that we are using the increased deployment of renewable energy, looking into the also energy efficiency side as well. And we are now, moving to more on the high level technology. So we are looking at more on the integration of advanced technologies, but not only the physical technologies, but also innovative business model, as well as the financing instruments. And we are not only the operations or only the investment itself, but we are also putting our effort in creating, enabling the institutional and regulatory framework, so to say, for the effective markets and sector development. Yeah, this is the kind of 7 operational priorities under the ADB. The strategy 2030 is not linked, is not specific for the energy sector itself, but it is more on the theme area and how the energy sector, so to say, our energy operations are embedded into or contribute to the individual 7 operational priorities. You probably know, addressing the remaining poverty and reducing the inequality, gender equality, climate change, and more, and making cities more livable. So it's more on the urban development, and also the promoting rural development and food security, as well as the governance institution capacity, and also fostering the regional cooperation and integration, and how the energy operations will contribute to each of that. It is not separated, but the thing is somehow it is a link to that, and then we're working on with the different dimensions to achieve this kind of operational priorities. When we look at the energy sector lending from the 2009 to 2019, when it started, so to say, in the 2007, when we started all the energy for all initiative and focus on the clean energy development. So when we look at over the past 10, 11 years, the ADB lending of total was 23% on average of the energy sector operations in the entire ADB lending. And from the total energy sector lending of this 23%, which is roughly on average 4 to 5 billion per year in the rolling of the 3-year average. And we are using about 45% was the focus on the clean energy development, and while this 55% is still T&D, because that is the SDG goal in terms of energy access, linking that, so to say, the grid system to have the access for the DMCs. So we are putting 55% on that one over the 10 years. And then in terms of the climate mitigation financing that, we are focusing on this about from the clean energy is the kind of definition on that one, is that renewable energy, promoting the renewable energy is 63%, while the energy efficiency, which we started quite it varies to yearly basis, but in fact it's about 34%. And then some of this is very little on the fuel switching to more cleaner fuels, so to say. That is how we are operating on that one. When we look at the clean energy finance during the same period in terms of billion, the target is to 2 billion per year, which we have actually when the climate financing started in the later phases, so later of 2000. But we achieved already 2 billion already in the 2011 towards 2012, and then we increased that, and then for the past couple of years, 2 years, that we've seen that it is going down below the 2 billion that we look at. The major issue on this is the cost reduction, rapid cost reduction of the renewable technology, so to say, for deployment of that one. And then we also see that the market itself for the clean energy or renewable energy, the market is more or less very mature. So that it is we are not, our operation is a little lower, because that leads to also the financing of that from the private investors as well. So private banking and those kind of commercial banking. That's why we're just reducing it. Just because I have to highlight here it is because this is purely that our focus of the energy was more on the electricity, so to say. So we are now we are, due to this strategy 2030, that we are expecting, we are looking at more broader of the energy access, not only focus on the electricity, but also to the other energy in terms of the cooling, heating, as well as cooking. So we're expecting that will be increased to the level of at least 2 billion per year. So from the progress of in energy access, which we look at very closely on the outcomes from the operation, is that we have from 2008 to 2008 to 2019, we had a $9.5 billion that we put in the energy access for the mainly focus on that one. And then through that also then we had, so to say, on the same period 25 million households accumulated in the same period that they had energy access in our ADB EMCs. And when we look at the other outcomes that we are measuring from the clean energy indicators, that over the years, this is annual, that based on that, like last year it was that like additional renewable energy capacity installed was a full gigawatt. And then that led to but the thing is that it is not only the from the more on the supply side, but we'll look at the demand side as well. So CO2 emission reduction was we achieved that, and of course the electric savings is mostly coming from the advance of the technology, clean energy technologies, and also from the demand and the supply side energy efficiency. And in terms of renewable energy electricity generation, that we had about 8.3 terawatt hour per year. In terms of lending, that it is the below table which you will look at is that this is how we divided different department in the ADB, so to say. So starting from the first column is the clean, is the Central West Regional Department, East Asia, Pacific, and Private Sector Operation Department. and then South Asia, and then Southeast Asia. This is how it is, and then we'll look at the total. So when we look at the in 2019 lending itself, and then it amounted to 2.44 billion, where it's about 0.4 billion came from the, for the supporting the private sector operation department, which is about 17% of the total energy sector lending. In terms of the climate mitigation finance, that we approved 1 billion, which includes about 30% of the climate finance mitigation finance from the private sector operation department. So certainly that because the transmission based on the MDBs, so to say, multi-development methodology, that transmission distribution projects without this are not considered as a climate finance, so but it accounts for 52% of the energy lending approved in 2019. These are just the number of projects which were approved last year. We so to say classified between the 7 operation priorities. So altogether it's something like 45 projects per year. And this is the kind of we're moving forward, so to say, project energy sector lending, which is based on our kind of work program and budget framework, so to say. So in 2020, we still have a couple of months that we are in an approval program. We expect that is about 6 billion, but it may not due to this delays in the current situation. But we are expecting about clean energy is about 40%, and transmission distribution 43%, and others that we are going 17%. So to say that is the kind of thing, the kind of allocation, so to say, that we are foreseeing it. And for the next couple of years, 2021, 2022, we are average lending that we're expecting about 5 billion per year, and with the clean energy representing about between 40 and 50% of the lending, which is we expecting quite a strong, so to say, more focus on the clean energy per se, in the ADB's lending on that one. So, and when we look at how the energy sector will look, from now already we are in progress of implementation on that one. So which might be of your, for participants' interest is that will further increase the clean energy investments. So to say, to develop and demonstrate the viability of new renewable energies. So to say, it is not just, we've been focusing on mostly on the solar and onshore, and in terms of, and then, mini hydros, so to say, from the renewable energy, in particular also distributed renewable energy in line with the energy access, our target goal, so to say. But we are looking at other type of the renewables that, we're also considering off-grid, and some of this, the storage, hydro pump storage, and other technologies beyond only the, what we have that. And certainly that over the past few years that we lacked a little bit of the limited, our lending was on the energy efficiency, and mostly they were focused on the supply side, but we're looking at more on the demand side, energy efficiency. So it is not only the, from the residential sector, how we can reduce, so to say, all this kind of the, over energy consumption from that part. And then also we are in not only the technology itself, but developing our support the ADB DMs for transforming their energy system overall to more flexible and resilient, and we call it smart, so to say, because we are all already doing the smart grid, including everything smart metering to the older management system, and then power, so to say, controller system. We apply that one. But we are going beyond that. We are deploying the ICT and some of digital applications, as well as the energy storage of the different type, even in the T&D subsectors. And then one of the major things that we are focusing is more on the strengthening the multi-sector approach, that we are not only looking at from the electricity sector, from the energy itself, but it goes beyond that also. We are looking at other heating, cooling, as well as cooking. And not only from the energy sector itself, along the operation, but we are jointly in kind of under the one ADB approach, so to say, with the different sectors. So we have some kind of, food, water, energy nexus, and energy and transport for the e-mobility charging station, developing the, hydrogen, different types of the, kind of a hydrogen, applying also the carbon capture utilization system, storage system, and all this multi-sector approach that we're looking at. Even beyond that, we are looking at even the education sector as well as the health sector, how we can apply the energy and renewable clean energy to the other sectors as well. So these are the indicative clean energy projects that we just highlighted it, but if there are other things, then So that is about my presentation, just a brief presentation on what we do in the energy sector overall in the different operations as well as knowledge department. So I will stop here, and any time of any questions that I'm happy to respond related to the energy sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Kee-Yung. I would like to take one question that we received right away. And the question may also be of relevance for our next speaker, but maybe you can answer it from your perspective. The question is, where would water resource management projects be positioned in terms of funding? Is there something that you can say on that question, Kee-Yung?
If this is the water project or something, then it depends on the upstream or downstream water. But in terms of the water supply, then we are looking at from the energy sector's point of view, that how the like a pumping and all those kind of things, or even the irrigation for the agriculture sector, that we are using the clean energy like a solar pump that we used also, or remote areas where they do, and then we look at that, how the distributed renewable energy system can supply the electricity or the type of the energy in the thermal to support that kind of things. So we are working at, but the thing is, the energy sector's operation, so to say, in terms of the funding, is that in their case is divided into two of the one projects, so to say. Even if it's a water project, then certain energy component will be funded from the energy energy budget, so to say.
Okay, thank you for answering this question. I would now like to hand over to our next speaker, and introduce him, because the energy sector is also very closely related to the topic of climate change. So I'm happy to introduce Mr. Virender Duggal. He's the principal climate change specialist within the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department from ADB. Virender is currently leading ADB's carbon market program, which provides carbon finance and technical capacity building support for mitigation actions in the Asia and Pacific region. He will tell us also about innovative projects and initiatives in the field of climate change and disaster risk management. So Virender, can you please switch on your microphone and your camera? Here is, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Herr Zimmermann. My sincere thanks to the organizers for inviting me to speak to this August gathering here in Austria. It is really my pleasure to be talking to all of you. As Herr Zimmermann introduced, my name is Virender Duggal, and I work here at the ADB in Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. I'll very briefly introduce what is our broad work agenda, work program that we have been doing in the space of climate change and disaster risk management. My colleague, Dr. Nam, very nicely articulated the operational priorities that the Asian Development Bank has under its long-term strategy 2030. And one of the key operational priorities is directly related to climate change. But before I come over there, let us very quickly touch upon some very important issue about the COVID-19 recovery, or the green recovery that is being talked about. And it has been more than sufficiently emphasized and clearly understood here in the region, Asia and the Pacific, that the countries must reorient their economies towards a more strategic low carbon trajectory. That is really very important in today's context. And at the same time, the countries must address the underlying vulnerabilities and strengthen their resilience. Therefore, it really requires them to have a vision of a long-term transformation by policy and the structural changes. So all these things are really very necessary and important if we have to charter a pathway of low carbon and resilient future that can really contribute to green recovery that is so important in today's context. Talking about COVID-19 recovery very briefly, we must think about the changing economies of the post-COVID-19 world. So therefore, we need to integrate risk and opportunity in a context where the social norms are challenged, companies are challenged, the infrastructure is quite challenging, including the virtual dialogues have become a new norm as we are having this conference today. So therefore, we think that the economies of a post-COVID-19 world would require a transformation of supply chains, and there would be, and there should be, a massive reallocation of capital. We are at a turning point where there is a great opportunity to push for climate change agenda, which is very important, and need to do away for dependence on the fossil fuel. That is, again, a very important topic at this point in time. Yeah, Dr. Nam very nicely articulated some of the very important priority sectors in the energy sector. So therefore, we think that in order to contribute to the green recoveries, that their countries need to invest on the demand side, like for example, energy efficiency buildings, supply side and renewable energy and storage, the transmission and distribution, climate resilient infrastructure, and water management. So, but at the same time, there is a very important requirement to de-risk these investments to make them bankable, which assumes all the more significance in today's context. Okay, so now this is a broad outline of my presentation. I'll give you a short introduction what our climate change agenda work at the ADB is there, and what are our priorities, and what we are doing in the climate and DRM finance, and some innovative projects and initiative that ADB has undertaken or is planning to undertake. Okay, first thing first, basically on the challenge that we are having in climate change and the disaster risk management. If we look at the concentration of CO2 emissions, Asia and the Pacific accounted for more than 43% of the global GHG CO2 emissions in 2017. So if sufficient and radical changes are not taken in time, then there are projections that by 2030, the region is going to emit 32.5 billion tons of CO2, which is likely to be more than 48% of the world's share. So this is the kind of scale that we are talking in Asia and the Pacific, and therefore we clearly say that the war against climate change is going to be won or lost in Asia and the Pacific. And the reason for us saying this is very clear. As you can see on this slide, there is an alarming gap. The world is not on track to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, which is one of the goals, very important goals of the Paris Agreement. If you see the red bar, looking at the current trajectories, the world is headed for 52 to 58 gigatons of CO2 by 2030, whereas our budget for 2030 is only 25 to 30 gigatons of CO2. And therefore, we have a lot of ground to cover if we have to achieve the net zero emissions consistent with 1.5 degrees by the mid-century. Okay, so this is the kind of backdrop, and therefore I would very quickly walk you through the priorities of ADBs on climate change and the disaster risk management. As very clearly articulated earlier, the tackling climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and enhancing environmental sustainability is one of the 7 operational priorities under ADB's long-term strategy 2030. So under operational priority number 3, which is highlighted in green on your screen, we have set out 2 targets which are very important and to be noted, especially in the context of business opportunities, that 75% of ADB's numbers of committed operations on a 3-year rolling average will support climate mitigation and adaptation by 2030. The second target under operational priority number 3 is that climate finance from ADB's own resources will reach $80 billion during the period 2019 to 2030. So these 2 targets very clearly emphasize the kind of importance that we are attaching to operational priority number 3, that is related to climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and enhancing the environmental sustainability in Asia and the Pacific. Okay. Dr. Nam also alluded to this point that we had set out climate finance targets to 2020, and I'm very, very pleased to report that the targets that we had set out for 2020, institution achieved that 1 year ahead. So the target of doubling our climate finance to $6 billion by 2020 was accomplished in 2019 itself. Okay. So for enhancing actions to tackle climate change, these are the 4 pillars of work that we are doing. Clean energy, Dr. Nam very nicely emphasized and clearly explained what are we doing in the space of clean energy. The other 3 areas include sustainable urban development, sustainable transport, and climate smart agriculture. Okay. So, and the next element is building comprehensive approach to climate and disaster resilience. So in this context, we need to understand that there are advanced different aspects of resilience through cross-sectoral investment beyond infrastructure in social, environmental, and financial sectors. So then you can see on the screen that for this, we need to build systems-wide resilience through projects that recognize the independency of critical infrastructure. It is also important that the investments that bring transformational change through resilience, that is risk-informed land use planning to inform selection of infrastructure projects. So this is kind of a comprehensive approach for achieving resilience through support of finance, knowledge, and partnerships. I will quickly touch upon the climate and disaster risk management finance that we are pursuing. This is, I did mention about the institutional target in terms of achieving climate finance from our own resources as a part of the targets under our strategy 2030. And this chart shows you the kind of very impressive track record that we are having. The table at the top gives you our climate finance achievement targets in 2019. If you look at the total, we had a total of more than $7,008 million of climate finance, of which 6,341 came from ADB's own resources, and then we mobilized external resources to the tune of $668 million. Now, when we look at delineation into mitigation and adaptation, you can clearly see that more than $5,499 million went into mitigation, whereas $1,510 million went into adaptation initiatives. So that brings us to the total targets that you can, total achievement that we have done in the space of climate finance. And I'm talking of the projects that have been approved. Okay, so in terms of ADB's approach for climate finance, there are three vertical pillars, as we can broadly speak about: deploying concessional financial resources, that's number one. Number two is maximizing market mechanisms, and the third one is catalyzing private capital. So deploying concessional resources, we work through various mechanisms and various instruments and modalities. As you can see on the slide on the extreme left pillar, internally managed resources like ADB donor trust funds and special funds. I'll give you a few examples in the following slides, but a few are listed out there, like Asia Pacific Climate Finance Fund, High Level Technology Fund, and there are many other bilateral funds. At the same time, we also mobilize financial concessional finance resources through multilateral funds like Climate Investment Funds, the Global Environment Facility, and the Green Climate Fund. I'll very briefly touch upon in the next slide. On the second pillar, on the maximizing market mechanisms, we mobilize upfront carbon finance through various trust funds that we manage. For example, we are managing the Future Carbon Fund, a trust fund under the Kyoto Protocol, and Japan Fund for JCM, the joint crediting mechanism initiated by the government of Japan. And finally, we catalyze private capital from direct project finance and also through public-private partnerships. Yeah. So this slide gives you a little bit of a reflection on the number of projects that we have supported in Asia and the Pacific to access climate finance from the Green Climate Fund. My apologies for a very small font, but this only reflects that we have a number of projects which are getting supported from the Green Climate Fund. And on to the next slide. Okay, so we are also set up a new trust fund for the Pacific region, the Ireland Trust Fund for Building Climate Change and Disaster Resilience in Small Island Developing States, sits in the Pacific, as I mentioned. This fund tries to provide technical assistance and capacity development through activities such as financing climate-proof infrastructure, helping countries to plan and respond to the climate change, and leveraging global climate resources for mitigation and adaptation resources. So this, you can see that the number of proposals that we are currently considering in Vanuatu, as you can see, Community Action Plan for Strengthening Urban Resilience. We are also working on a project in Tonga to support Tonga's Climate Change Trust Fund for community adaptation projects. Another innovative instrument we have is Asia Pacific Climate Finance Fund. It's a multi-donor trust fund. It can go up to $30 million contribution for Germany. This fund will support assessment, development, and provision of financial risk management products that can help countries to unlock the financing for climate investments in clean technologies and practices, which are very necessary for climate change mitigation and adaptation. I will quickly touch upon the next very innovative instruments of Canadian Climate Fund for the private sector in Asia. This is designed to support greater private sector participation in climate change mitigation and adaptation in lower middle income countries and upper middle income countries in small island states. So I will very quickly move on to some of the innovative projects and initiatives. One example that I have picked up for sharing with you is a national solar park project in Cambodia. This is the first large-scale solar park in Southeast Asia. So we will, under this project, we'll 100 megawatt solar park in Kampong in Cambodia. And this project under this project, the capacity will also be enhanced. Capacity of the electric do Cambodia which is the utility, will also be strengthened. This project was approved 2019. As you can see, the total financing for this project is 21.65 million. Most of it is earmarked as climate finance of 21.64 million, and there's a very small component of adaptation finance of 1.17 million. In addition to this kind of project, ADB has also innovative stream to mobilize external financial resources to support mitigation actions through carbon pricing instruments. And we are running a carbon market program, which is a combination of trust funds and technical assistance. Under the technical assistance, we support countries in Asia and the Pacific to access various opportunities that are available using market mechanisms to get additional financial resources that can incentivize investments. But at the same time, ADB also designs and manages different trust funds that can mobilize external financing, which can also work as a co-financing to support and incentivize mitigation actions in Asia and the Pacific. We set up Asia Pacific Carbon Fund, which is now closed after successful operations. The Future Carbon Fund, as you can see, the third column is still up and running. It is purchased carbon credits under the Kyoto Protocol's mechanism, the Clean Development Mechanism. This fund is mobilizing carbon finance to 36 mitigation initiatives in the region that is still up and running. On the extreme right, you see Japan Fund for the Joint Crediting Mechanism. It is an innovative financing mechanism initiated by the government of Japan, through which we provide grant funding to provide additional financial resources to mitigation projects to kind of lower down the cost of adapting advanced low carbon technologies in Asia and the Pacific. We are supporting 5 such projects in the region. This is kind of the architecture of ADB's Carbon Market 2.0. As you know, that we now have Paris Agreement. Under the Paris Agreement, there's an Article 6, which kinds of sets up the foundation work for setting up post-2020 carbon markets. So ADB has set up an Article 6 support facility through which we are supporting countries in Asia and the Pacific to enhance their preparedness to participate and take advantage of the new market mechanisms under the Paris Agreement. So we have set up this facility with funding from government of Germany, the Swedish Energy Agency, and ADB's own financial resources. Through this facility, we are supporting our countries to pilot different kinds of mitigation actions, how they can prepare, learn lessons, contribute to the ongoing international negotiation, and also enhance their preparedness for the post-2020 markets, as I mentioned earlier. We are also planning, we are in the process of setting up a new trust fund, Climate Action Catalyst Fund, that will support countries in Asia and the Pacific to access additional climate finance in the form of a carbon finance to support mitigation actions through the trading of international transferable mitigation outcomes, or ITMOs as they are called under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This will be another trust fund in ADB's overall carbon market program that will once again support countries to kind of implement advanced low carbon technologies and also access additional financial resources which can motivate and catalyze investments in new technologies. ADB in this direction, since the negotiations under Article 6 are still ongoing and the negotiators are doing a great job, working very hard, but at the same time, there's a huge amount of disparity in capacity within Asia and the Pacific and other parts of the world. So ADB has taken a bit of a thought leadership to bridge the capacity deficit in Asia and the Pacific, and also to instigate some very healthy technical discussion among various stakeholders. So in that context, we have been doing some knowledge work which can facilitate this kind of discussions among various architects of the new market mechanisms which are being envisaged under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I know I have a bit of a run against time, but this is I put together for the advantage of the audience here who are keen interest in collaborating with ADB, as my colleagues did mention. So what I have done in these three slides is put together a list of various technical assistance programs that we are currently running in our team, and also listed some of the trust funds. These technical assistance as well as the trust funds that we are running offer some business opportunities for companies which are looking at consulting opportunities with our teams. You can see there I've given the web links to different technical assistance and the names of the people. There's a link and a key activities that we are doing in each of these technical assistance or the trust funds. So in the interest of time, I'll take a stop here. And of course, I will be very happy to come back to answer any questions the team may have. In any case, my email ID is given at the end of this presentation. You can reach out to me in case you have a specific interest in any of these projects that I have listed here, and I'll be very happy to connect you to my colleagues who are managing these individual technical assistance or the trust funds. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity and giving me a very patient hearing today. Thank you very much. Over to you back, Zimmerman.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I would now ask you to switch off your camera and your microphone. All companies who are interested in bidding for projects, they are also concerned with the topic of procurement. Today we have a mix of companies attending, mainly SMEs from different sectors, but also some larger companies. For all of them, procurement is an issue. Therefore, I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Glen Harris, who is a senior procurement specialist from ADB. Glen has spent the majority of his career based in the Middle East, where he has been responsible for mega projects in the size of several $billion. So he's very experienced both in the field of public and private sectors. Within ADB, he's responsible for the procurement of contractors and consultants for energy projects in Central and West Asia. Glen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zimmerman, and greetings from Australia. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you tonight or in the morning in your time and discuss the opportunities available within the ADB sectors, both publicly and privately. I'm not going to speak for a long time today. My two previous colleagues have spoken in depth and given you a lot of valuable information. I'm going to focus on three main areas. The first is the volume, size and spread of the different opportunities, both in consulting and contracting, how to find these opportunities, and lastly, how to successfully bid and win these opportunities. I'm going to talk you through a few slides to start with about the different portfolios and different amounts that we focus on. You can see from this first slide that we split our funding or projects both into the private sector, which is called a non-sovereign, and of course the public sector, which is the sovereign. You can see that in terms of how much money we lend for each sector, the private sector is much smaller than the public sector, but as you'll see later on, that's an area that's growing quite significantly. You can also see in this slide that there's an amount of money allocated as uncontracted portfolio. This is money that we have budgeted for projects, but the projects have not yet been contracted out or signed. Now, in terms of the opportunities and the volume of opportunities, I mean, last year, ADB, I should say in 2018, ADB contracted 9,000 different contracts between goods, works, and consultancy. So this means one thing that I should stress at the very start. Because of the huge volume of contracts that we have to issue every year, the actual process for procurement is very stringent. And when you compare it to the private sector and how items are procured there, it is a lot more stringent. And this is because we have to manage 9,000 contracts a year. So in terms of how they're split, it's not exactly 50-50. We do more consultancy contracts typically per year than civil works and good contracts. To give you some idea of the amounts of money per contract, I mean, I work in the Central West in the energy sector. Typically for works contracts, it's between 100 million US to $1 billion. And consultancy, it varies anywhere between 50,000 for small projects up to 10 million for site supervision projects. As my previous colleagues spoke before, typically approximately 60% of the funding goes to two areas: energy, where I work, and the transport sector. The remaining 40% is broken down to water, urban infrastructure, agriculture, education, finance, public sector, etc. When we look at how we distribute these funds across the region, you can see that a significant amount of the funding goes to Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Central West Asia, with a smaller proportion of the funding going towards East Asia and the Pacific. And this is to be expected because in terms of the population and the types of projects, most of it is slanted towards Central and West Asia. In terms of the biggest borrowers, which in fact for you means which countries have the most projects in terms of amounts, India, China, and Pakistan are the top three, followed by Bangladesh and Indonesia. Now this changes year on year, but typically you find these five players in the top five. In terms of the funding trends, as I said before, the sovereign portfolio makes up a significant proportion, but as you can see, the private sector is growing year on year. And this is a trend we expect to continue. In terms of the type of opportunities, it's extremely varied. We have a lot of supply contracts and for machinery, equipment, computers, furniture, etc. But for the supply contracts, anything you can possibly imagine, we contract for. Civil works, as I said before, a large part of the portfolio is both energy and transport. So we do a lot of roads and railways and bridges. We do a lot of power stations, transmission lines, hydroelectric dams. But we do a lot of other things in between. We do schools, airports, universities, a huge variety of civil works. Again, for consulting, we have a lot of consulting opportunities, both as individual consultants and also consultancy firms. The individual consultants are extremely varied, from environmental to safeguards to security to anything you can possibly imagine. The larger consultancy projects are the site supervision projects for our major infrastructure projects. So for every power station we have or every hydroelectric dam we have, we need a supervision consultant. And those supervision consultancy contracts are usually for 18 months to 2 years, and they range from 500,000 to 10 million American dollars. So they're quite significant. We also have what we call non-consulting services, and these are things that are quite a simple scope, are easily procured, and things like surveys, training, translation, etc. We have quite a few of those opportunities. The next few slides are going to talk you through which countries are the most proficient in winning contracts. Now, when we look at the top 5 member states that have won goods contracts, you can see in 2020, India, China, Indonesia, Turkey, and Uzbekistan were the top 5. Now, this changes a little bit year on year, but as you can see, for the last 5 years or 4 years, India, China, and India always are very prominent there. So these countries have been very successful in winning contracts for goods. In terms of works contracts, it's a similar type situation. In 2020, India and China did very well. You can see that the Philippines has made an appearance at number 3. This is mainly due to a very large metro project that we're currently progressing. If we drill down into it a bit further and we look at which contractors, companies have been very successful in the last 4 years globally, you can see that in terms of quantity at 545 million, BML Group, but in terms of actual number of contracts, ADB Group has been very successful. When we look at works contracts for the same amount of time, we can see that Siemens and Larsen and China Railway have all won over 20 contracts, with Siemens having the largest amount in terms of budget at 833 million. You might notice that China is very prominent on that list, been very successful in the last 4 years supplying goods. In terms of consultancies, SMEC from Australia, my hometown, have done very well historically, as has Aegis, followed by the Korean Consultant International and Arab at 3 and 4. You might ask yourself, why has SMEC and Aegis been so successful? Both those entities are extremely thorough in the proposals that they submit to ADB. Those proposals technically, in terms of the structure, are almost perfect. They're an example of what we expect from consultants. How has Austria done? Well, if we look back at 2019, we can see that in terms of goods and works contracts, Austria won 22 million American dollars worth of projects. Consultancy, not as high, it was only $1.5 million in 2019. And I'm hoping tonight, this morning your time, after the presentation, with the information that we've shared, that we can boost those numbers up to much higher in 2020 and 2021. When we drill down a bit further into what companies and contractors have been successful in Austria, we can see that it's dominated by 2, GmbH and Placer and Thorpe. And again, transport playing a major role, and a little bit surprisingly, health sector as well. So those 2 suppliers and contractors by themselves in the last 4 years have won $31.5 million worth of contracts. When we look at consultancy, it's a little bit of a different story. We can see 3 out of the 5 consultancy contracts are water and urban infrastructure projects, with energy and transport making up the remainder 5. Perhaps a little disappointing, we can see that the total consultancy in the last 5 years now is just under $11 million. So again, we're hoping we can boost that in 2020 and 2021. I think the most important part of what I'm going to say today is how we procure goods and works at ADB, because it's a little bit different than procurement in the private sector. To start with, I think it's very important to state that ADB itself often doesn't do the procuring. The actual procuring is done by the borrowing entity or the executing agency, which is often a ministry or a government department in another country. The role that ADB plays in procurement is to ensure that the guidelines that ADB issue are followed very closely. And you can appreciate that with over 60 countries that we work across, it's very important that we have very clear and strict guidelines that all countries and executive agencies must follow in order to obtain funding for these projects. It's no surprise that ADB prefers open international bidding as its preferred modality. We've found over the years that achieves the best value for money results for all parties. Like the private sector, nearly all of our consultancy contracts and goods have technical and financial elements in them. For works contracts, the lowest price technically compliant bid is the winner. So we don't often use weighting or merit systems. Consultancies are a little bit different. ADB, as my colleague spoke for, ADB procures consultants directly for its own needs, and that's typically in setting up and looking at feasibility studies before the projects advance. Excuse me. And then the other type of procurement is done by the excuse me, the governments that we lend to. And again, our role in that is oversight. Again, our preferred modality procurement is open international bidding, but we also use limited bidding quite a bit for consultancy. Again, similar to the private sector, the bids have a technical part and a financial part. But unlike the private sector, the ratio of technical to financial is 90-10, which means if you have the best technical bid, most times you're the winner, with price playing a little part. In fact, when you look at the opportunities that ADB publicize on its websites, the budgets are often stipulated. So the budget is known up front. So it really comes down to technical submission. So again, unlike the private sector, if you've got the best technical submission, you'll usually win the consultancy contract. As I said before, we prefer open competitive bidding wherever possible, but we do have a series of other modalities. We have limited competitive bidding or shortlisting, an RFQ for goods. We also have framework agreements. And this is a growing area actually for consultancy. So consultants that we use frequently, for example, environmental consultants, safeguard consultants, security consultants, procurement consultants. Instead of going to the market over and over again, we're putting frameworks together. So we'll go out and we'll pre-qualify a series of consultants, and those consultants will then be in the framework. And then when a consultancy comes up in that particular area, we will just go to the framework, select a number of consultants, and have them issue a price. So that's going to cut down the procurement time considerably, from months to weeks. Occasionally for works contracts, we'll do direct contracting that's not competitive. Now these are just the main modalities, but if you go onto the ADB website, a link that I've supplied later, you can go through all the different modalities that we use at ADB. I think one of the major questions that you'll have as consultants and contractors is how do I access these opportunities? I've already said that there's 9,000 opportunities approximately every year, okay, and not all of them are relevant to you. Now, in terms of consultancy, it's quite easy. We have a one-stop shop. We have a consultancy management system where all the opportunities are listed. And this is the same platform that you'll use to submit your bids. So the consultancy management system is the central focus point for consultancy, both consultancy for firms and consultancy for individuals. CMS has a lot of opportunities, but it's very easy to manipulate, where you can narrow it down to the actual field that you're interested in. And you can actually set up e-alerts where you designate what type of projects you're interested in. And when those type of opportunities become available, an email is sent out to you. And then you can then go back to the page, click on the link and look at all the details that are up there. For goods and services and works contracts, it's a little bit more complicated because there's not one area you can look at. ADB undertakes a country strategy plan every 5 years, and that country strategy plan that's on our platform highlights the priorities for those countries for the next 5 years. So it may be they're going to go focus on energy, could be they're focusing on water, sustainability, could be education. So a good starting point is to narrow it down to what countries you're interested in, go to those strategies and see what the focus is for those countries. The next step of granularity is, again, on the ADB platform, we post all the general notices. So again, you can set up an e-alert where if you're interested in projects connected to education, could be building schools or universities, you'll get an e-alert once those opportunities are available. And similar to transport and energy, you can set up an e-alert so that you're notified. I've been speaking about the ADB platforms, and I've actually supplied links, web links to all those at the end of the presentation, so they'll be shared with you, so no need to worry too much about that. Some useful tips. As I said, we've got 9,000 projects and consultancies awarded every calendar year. And we are very strict, and we have to be very strict in our guidelines. And this is something that is very important to understand. So there's a couple of golden rules. So the first simple ones is we need the correct bid security in the amount, validity, and the text. Now, it sounds very simple, but this is probably one of the main reasons that contractors are disqualified before they even get to the financial elements, is that they don't do this part correctly. Signatures and power of attorneys. This document's vital. If you're putting in for doing a joint venture proposal, even more so, that we must have these documents signed to have a valid bid. References. If the bid documents ask for references, it's very important that you supply these references. And it's also important to note that a lot of countries want to check the references. So it's important to submit them, but it's also important to notify the referees that they're going to be contacted by some of these entities to verify the references. Another key mistake that companies or bidders often make is that they don't label the envelopes correctly. Again, most bids have a technical element that should be sealed in a technical envelope, and then a separate envelope should be submitted for the commercial or financial element. If you put both of your proposals in the same envelope, there is a possibility that you'll be disqualified. The other key rule is we do not accept bids after the deadline. We're often asked, and we'll often have bidders come up with all sorts of reasons why they can't meet the deadline. But unfortunately, it's a golden rule. If you don't meet the deadline, we can't accept the bid. Another important factor is that, ADB funded projects have to be bid for from consultants and contractors in the eligible countries. So example, Austria is an eligible country, its consultants and its contractors can bid. But bidders from other countries cannot bid. So don't form a JV with a company that from a country that's not on the ADB eligibility list. It's not acceptable. For consultancy projects or award, one of the key errors we often find is that the CVs submitted are not signed. The CVs play a critical role in consultancy award. It's very important. In fact, it's mandatory that they're signed. And although it may sound a little bit anal, there is a page limit for consultancy proposals. Please don't go over the page limit. What not to do? Firstly, do not submit conditional bids. So do not in your proposal tell us that you're not going to do A, B, C, D. You must address the scope of work, and the expectation is that there will be no conditional items submitted with your bid. As I said before, do not submit technical and financial bids in the same envelope. That's often grounds for disqualification. For works contracts, Section 3 is very important. Section 3 is where we ask basic questions. It will ask things like, please supply 2 projects in the last 10 years of a similar scope. It may ask you to list subcontractors who are carrying out work. It often asks about your cash flow situation. Obviously, we want to award contracts to strong financial companies. So Section 3 in the works contract is very vital. And that's the area where we find that most bidders are disqualified. And again, to reiterate, do not enter into a JV with a company from a country that's not on the eligibility list. You'd be surprised as how often that happens, and that's just instant disqualification. I've spoken about a lot of links in my presentation. The most important ones, of course, are CMS, but if you go to the ADB Business Center and the ADB Procurement page, you'll find all the opportunities and all the documents you need to bid. Thank you very much. I haven't spoken for very long, but I hope I've given you an idea of what opportunities there are, where to find the opportunities, and how to bid for them. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Glen. Thank you for joining us from Australia today. Before we come to the end of part one, we have already received several questions to our speakers. So I would like to ask all our ADB speakers to switch on their camera and microphone again. The first question would be to Kee-Yung. One of the biggest challenges in project development are the project development costs for things such as project studies, licenses, and permits. We are a project development company that aims to develop and operate large-scale PV, solar, and wind power plants, and we have to bear the costs alone, and the development time therefore takes much longer. So the question is, does ADB have a program that also supports projects in the early stages of development?
Well, this is the kind of a good question that we are receiving most of the times, that very often this kind of questions on that one. The first I would like to draw a line here is that we are directly working with mostly on the with the sovereign, which was mentioned a couple of times, that with the government is our counterpart, so to say. And so any type of the in terms of the technical assistance, where we develop certain feasible study or feasibility study, pre-feasibility study, market assessment, and all this kind of things. But this should all come through, so to say, even the private sector development, that should come through the kind of mostly is coming through the government side. That's the one that which we do. Certainly, in terms of that, we support the if it is innovative technology, new technologies, then we are dealing with all this technical assistance program that we support, so to say, and then we are looking at all this due diligence of the specific technology as well as the development of the replication, while scale up any type of the project. So in terms of development of a project, that is the how the operation department is working, and we are putting the where we are is that where I am responsible is we are providing technical advice and support through the fund or through the knowledge technical advice to the those kind of activities. So this is the part of the one that should come through, so to say, with the government, and then this is the where we can support even the development, early stage of the development of new technologies.
Okay, thank you. So our next question goes to Glen Harris. So the question is, for consultancy services, given that the budget is announced, are there criteria for abnormally low bids applied? And I'd also give you the second question for you. Are there CVs expected to be submitted for expressions of interest?
For the first question, the budgets are public, but if we did receive a bid that was substantially lower than the market rate, then we do have the ability to disqualify that bidder. And sorry, what was the second question?
The second question was on expressions of interest and if there has to be a CV submitted with the EOI.
Rustam, what's the answer to that?
Let me add on the first question. So there is a different provision in our bidding documents for procurement of goods and works and for consulting services. In the consulting services, we indicate the budget, but you have to be very careful in reading the budget because it could be estimated budget. Then it means the proposal, financial proposal from consulting firms could exceed that budget. If it is indicated as a maximum budget, then if your proposal is $1 more than the maximum budget, the proposal will be rejected outright without any evaluation. But most of our consulting services selections are done on so-called cost and quality basis, where first is the technical evaluation, and those who pass the minimum score, so they will be qualified for the second stage of financial evaluation. And for consulting services, even if the price is very low, we do not reject the bids for being abnormally low. We don't have such interpretation in the consulting services. However, in procurement of goods and works, especially in works, we have a provision of treatment of abnormally low bids, and there is a very kind of a detailed process on how to determine. It's not just comparing the lowest bid with the second lowest or comparing with the estimate, because estimate could be outdated. And with all the dynamics in the market, see, we have to take into account that from the time of the budget approval to actual announcement of the tender, there could be 6 months or 1 year gap. And during that time, the prices could change in the market. So what was reasonable as at a $10 million cost estimate a year ago, the actual prices in the market could be $5 million. So there is a detailed provision in the bidding documents, but does not mean that all bids which are below certain threshold will be automatically rejected. For civil works, bidders will have to justify what are the reasons of their low prices, because in civil works, the unit costs comprise of cost of material, labor, fuel, and they have to demonstrate that the price, for example, for materials is commensurate with the market prices. The fuel is also in the range which is available in that particular country. And the labor should correspond to the minimum wages in that particular country. So this is about abnormally low bids. About CVs, for at the expression of interest stage, we do not require CVs of experts which will be proposed, because this is not the bidding. It's only sort of pre-qualification. What firms have to propose or submit is only their past experience. Nobody is telling them whom we are going to propose to do the job. So therefore, except for quality-based selection, in all other types of selection method for consulting firms, at the EOI stage, we do not require CVs. But these will be required when, after the EOI, the firms are shortlisted, and then they will be invited to submit their actual technical proposal and price proposal. And the technical proposal should have detailed information about the team composition, because then at this stage, CVs will be evaluated. And we would require CVs to be signed by experts themselves, because we have many cases where good CVs were submitted, evaluated, and then during negotiations, it was found that the name of that person who was proposed as an expert, and the CV was submitted without knowledge of that expert. So this is a very kind of serious flaw, breach of procedures, and this may result in integrity violations and appropriate sanctions. So therefore, just keep this in mind. So, at UI stage, no CVs. At the stage of submission of actual proposals, CVs must be submitted. No CVs, then there will be 0 rating for that particular position. Thank you.
Thank you, Rustam. I have another question for Virender. What is the strategy of ADB in terms of disaster management related to the climate change impact on the transport sector? So, did you hear the question, Virender?
If you could repeat it once again, please.
Yes. What is ADB's strategy in terms of disaster management related to the climate change impact of the transportation sector?
Okay, thank you. At ADB, what we are trying to do in terms of the disaster risk management and enhancing the resilience, first and foremost, what we have started to do is the climate proofing of all our investments. So whenever we are providing support to a particular project, we do the climate proofing, we do the proper screening of the project, look at how we can enhance the resilience element, how we can look at the disaster risk management, and basically the entire whole 9 yards of the screening of the project. That's very important. And then we try to build in components in the design and the development and implementation of the project so that the disaster elements are duly taken care of. But at the same time, it is really very important that the capacity of all the relevant stakeholders is enhanced, and that is taken care of by a number of initiatives, including the technical assistance and capacity building programs for the people who are involved in the design, development, and implementation of the project. So that's again which is provided. And of course, as you have noticed, that there are very many initiatives to provide technical assistance to enhance the disaster risk management of the projects and the programs that we are supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Virender. So we have come to the end of our first part. I would like to thank all our ADB speakers for taking the time and joining us today. Thank you from Vienna, and you're welcome to stay with us for part 2, which we're going to start right now. So part 2 will be with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. And we have another 4 speakers joining us from several cities across Europe. Our first speaker from EBRD, headquarters in London, is Anna Draskovic. She's the head of business development group of EBRD. I think she has already switched on her microphone, and she will give you an overview on EBRD's investment operations and products. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all the companies that joined us today. And then I would like to actually introduce to you EBRD just broadly, and then hand over to my colleagues who will focus a little bit more on Western Balkans and topics of more, I would say, specific interest to you. I would just like to share with you that what you probably know, EBRD is an IFI. We have been established by, at the moment, we have 69 countries as shareholders, and 2 intergovernmental institutions. Our shareholder base is increasing, and we just received 2 more applications during our annual meeting, which happened recently. We operate across 38 countries, and this is what I actually want to emphasize today. And as I mentioned, 38 countries, you can see them here. In each of them, we have representative offices, we have teams on the ground, we are super connected to business communities and to governments. So we would be very, very pleased if you get in touch with us related to any of these countries. We will be very happy to help and to share our knowledge and update you on what is going on, what is the situation now during COVID pandemic, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges across these geographies. Then in my next slide, I would like to show to you our investment ranges. I'm not going to spend too much time here. It's advertising for us. You're probably not interested, but what is interesting here is to see what are the countries where most of our investments are going, the numbers of projects, the sizes that we are talking about, and our split when it comes to regions. You can see that SCE is clearly still dominating a region when it comes to EBRD. The next slide that I would like to show is on our products and our product flexibility. And I will actually take a moment here. The presentation will clearly be shared with you, so do come back to us and ask us any questions that you may have. But I would like you to know that our product flexibility is indeed immense. It ranges through debt, equity, and trade finance products. Sizes are, as you can see, very stretched. We have long tenors. We provide financing in local currency very often. And a lot of our projects have a donor component. We are very focused on green, and this is where this support from our donor comes from. Clearly, inclusion is another important element. The final slide that I will show you is a very simple one. These are the contact details from myself and a colleague of mine, Christian Hartung. Thank you, Chris, for setting up the event today on our behalf. And we are here to answer any of your questions going forward in respect to any country or any sector that EBRD is active in. And now over to my colleagues. Thank you.
A very good morning to everybody. I think it's my turn. My name is Zsuzsana Hargitai, and I'm EBRD's Regional Director for Western Balkans. Apologies for flying blind, but nothing can prevent us from going ahead with this seminar to attract further interest from Austrian companies to the Western Balkans, not even my computer crash. I understand that also my slides would be manipulated by WKO, so I would like them to go to the slide when I add just 2 or 3 things about EBRD. So this is the second slide, where I would like to just pinpoint 1 or 2 issues related to our objectives and our key strengths. In the objective side, again, in the Western Balkans as well, we are focusing on these 6 main objectives of EBRD. We have just adopted our new 5-year strategy at EBRD, and you would agree with me that we did it right, that our top priorities are to boost green economy, decarbonization, across all the spectrum of investments that we are making, whether private, whether through financial institutions, or in the public sector. It is followed by a part of the competitive economy, which is important, digitalization and the use of new technologies. And last but not least, also we have to remember that equal opportunities are still not there in the countries where we are working. So to promote inclusive growth, we strongly believe it also helps the development of a competitive economy. Anna has already described some of our key strengths. I would like to dwell on 2. One is that EBRD is also here to promote policy reforms. Colleagues will talk about it a bit. I will also highlight, for instance, in the area of green economy, how we have been working on buildings energy efficiency standards so that such standards are now in legislative acts and actions could follow. We have already supported auction-based capacity allocation for renewable energy. We are in Albania. We are doing the same now in Serbia and in Macedonia. So we hope to call ourselves also market creators for private investment. The second bit that I wanted to highlight is that we also try to catalyze further financing beyond our own. So we are doing syndications, we are doing parallel financing with local commercial banks. So we don't want to be the sole ones. Anyway, it's not EBRD's mission to finance everything. We rely a lot on our excellent partner banks across the Western Balkans. Next slide, please. This slide would describe all the sectors. It's just a snapshot where we are working in, basically covering all sectors, even healthcare when it comes to healthcare infrastructure or private healthcare provision. But when we go to the slide on EBRD in Western Balkans, again, I would highlight 3 things. One is that we are a lead international financial institutions in this region of, yes, around 20 million people, 6 countries. Our portfolio is currently over 6 billion euro, and our annual business has been growing steadily for the last 4 years. If in 2017 we were hovering around euro 850 million new commitments, this year I expect we can reach around 1.5 billion euro of investments. Roughly 50–60% of it is private sector, predominantly through financial institutions, and the rest is public sector investments. In the slide, there you see the portfolio by sector. It is reflective of the need of this region to invest in sustainable infrastructure. And one of my colleagues will be talking about it more, but this does not mean that in the 69% of the portfolio, we have only private sector, public sector projects with lending to governments. It also includes a lot of our investments that we have done with private sector, especially in renewable energy, or through PPPs, as we are financiers, the latest two PPPs in Serbia for Nikola Tesla Airport, and also the Belgrade solid waste PPP, which is about new landfill, waste to energy facility, and also the closure of the 40-year-old and very dangerous old landfill. Can we move forward? Strategic priorities, investment opportunities. I hope already the photos are attractive for you, for those who have not yet been in the Western Balkans. Irrespective of Corona, our economists see continued fiscal stability in the region. Debt to GDP is around 60% in most of the countries, but not all, hence the caveats. You might be familiar with pretty high public debt to GDP ratio in Montenegro, and we are also watching the how Albania is managing its own public debt to GDP ratio. When we are financing, we take this into account, and as I will talk about it a bit more, we are co-financing a lot with EU grants, capital grants. Across the region, we have stable local currencies, all the use of euro, and you've got resilient, good banking sector with strategic banking sector investors, with parent banks from the European Union state, but also we are working with locally owned banks. Economic growth, some would say it was sluggish. And I would be one of those, even in 2018, 2019. The region certainly has a potential to grow, if not double digit, but just below. And just was on the path of picking up when Corona hit this region as well. EBRD forecast for the region, so it's not individual countries, says we would expect a GDP contraction of 5.1% in 2020, with recovery at 3.4% in 2021. We might be on the conservative side, not to say pessimist. But what we take into account are two things. Number one, even countries like Serbia or Bosnia or Macedonia, which have manufacturing base, they are very deeply integrated already in the European Union. And again, they are exporting very heavily towards these countries. So their recovery would be very much dependent on the recovery in the European Union proper. Also, politicians as well as tourist operators, they are scratching their head what would happen in the new tourism season in Albania and Montenegro, which are major drivers of economic growth and represent a major share in GDP. Still, the main GDP growth drivers in the region are major public investments in transport and energy, and there has been an eminent role of foreign direct investment in GDP growth in Serbia for the last 2 to 3 years. This is the region of EU accession, and the 6 countries are proceeding at very pace. Serbia, Montenegro are more advanced in the EU accession negotiations, and the negotiation will start either by the end of this year or perhaps very early next year with Albania and North Macedonia. Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina, they still have some way to go before the Commission can issue an opinion, a favorable opinion about starting negotiations in those countries. But that doesn't mean that these 2 countries are not already adopting policies and they align their legislation with EU acquis. All the region has access to EU markets based on already on the stabilization and association agreements, and some of them, like Serbia, also have free trade agreements with Turkey, Russia, and other countries. And last but not least, a component of the EU accession is massive and impressive EU funding, capital grants, but also technical assistance. The latest one summarized a very impressive plan, and I will dwell on it in the Economic and Investment Plan for Western Balkans. I put here a couple of areas for key structural reforms and also strategic priorities I listed, and we shall share it with you, the presentation, which are priorities across the 6 Western Balkan countries. On the next slide, I will literally spend not more than 1 minute on it, because my colleague Guillaume Lebris will describe how we are working in the Western Balkans in infrastructure. Again, there is still unfinished business, as Guillaume would probably dwell on it, related to road construction, especially connections among the capitals of this region, where we are adding the green and digital twist through our projects, but there is an increased focus on rail. In municipal infrastructure, again, I would leave it to Guillaume. I listed a couple of projects that either we have signed already or we are working on across the region. I hope, Guillaume, you will dwell on how much we are expecting also private sector participation in quite a few of them, in particular in renewables in district heating, a program that is actually the preparation of which is financed by Austria. Energy is going to be very high on the agenda. And why? One is the green reason, but also the reason is that almost all electricity generation capacity in the Western Balkans dates back to before 1990. So their lifetime is coming to an end. And the question is whether they would like to choose the path, as we are nudging them towards decarbonization and abandoning the use of coal, or they would still continue, as in 2 countries of this region, invest in coal-fired power plant, which we strongly believe is a mistake. On the next slide, I would like to very quickly outline EBRD's energy strategy in the Western Balkans. So first, as I mentioned, we want to give a decisive push, and we've been working on it for the last 2 to 3 years, scaling up the share of renewable energy. And we have already financed, you will see it in the next slide, concrete investments in wind. We have financed already the first solar power with ESM in North Macedonia. And we expect this scaling up to happen across the region. We might be the last ones still to see, but we are not alone. The European Union and the Commission is with us to see gas as a transition fuel. We are supporting various countries to prepare their gas master plan, also to make use of the Trans-Adriatic pipeline and diversify their sources and routes of gas, also with a view of seeing such infrastructure being used at a later stage for hydrogen transmission. We have started looking at just transition. This beautiful phrase is about closure of coal mines and closure of coal-fired power plants. And we have launched the first diagnostic project in North Macedonia, and we have a very good and promising discussion with the government there, hopefully to be followed by Montenegro and Serbia as well. We are investing, and we want further investment in the infrastructure to reinforce it and to support smarter electricity grids or even smart metering, as it is the case in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we shall soon sign a loan agreement with the power utility of Serbia to roll out smart metering. Cross-border connectivity is also high on the agenda, both for electricity and gas. Finally, energy efficiency and also supporting green governance at the state-owned enterprises that are in the energy sector. We shall not be able to deliver on our green agenda if we are not working with state-owned utilities and state-owned utilities that embrace much better corporate governance. On the next slide, you see some highlights of what we are doing. We are very proud of having financed the first wind farms in Montenegro, in Kosovo. We financed the largest wind farms in the Western Balkans, in Serbia, in Albania. Again, what you would see here is the pride of EBRD, which was the lowest bidding price probably in Europe, as my colleagues advised me, for a solar plant, industrial scale solar plant at Karabasta in Albania. We are talking now to the French developer Voltaia about financing it, and the next tender for solar will be under preparation as of November for Albania. In North Macedonia, We financed the first large-scale photovoltaic plant in the country with ESM, the state-owned utility. And again, a 100 megawatt solar tender in this location is already open to private investors. Way to go. We would also work, obviously, with private corporate investors, ranging from ICT industry through agribusiness, property development, manufacturing services. And we have already financed quite a few transactions. We would like not to replace either domestic banks of the investors or local banks, but what we would like to add is added value. For instance, today, just to share with you, I'm going to have lunch with a cardboard, paper cardboard manufacturer, where we are helping with advisory services to increase their standards and make their production both more resource efficient and also meeting green standards that they are expected to deliver to their own customers. So this is something of an added value, just for an illustration, what we bring together with our financing. The other day, we were discussing, again, with another EU member state, how we could help their companies to look at potential nearshoring, whether through investments in the Western Balkans or just through grooming the suppliers. We have advisory services as well beyond financing to work with local companies, your suppliers, to meet your standards and bring perhaps closer to your own customer base these suppliers also from the Western Balkans. There has been a lot of word about the European Union's Economic and Investment Plan, a 9 billion euro grant program, front-loaded. That will be coupled with an EU guarantee that will kick in as of next year, and we shall join it as well with potential financing for investments that are expected to be implemented in the coming 4 to 5 years. So not prepared, implemented. There is a very strong drive. And the European Union, Austria as well, in it said, we want to base this plan on 3 pillars. Yes, we provide the funding, but the governments, you presented to us some of the flagship projects that we very much took into account. So there will be funding for it. But in exchange, you accelerate reforms, without which neither sustainable infrastructure or overall economic development can take place. And all this also within the framework of the accession process to the European Union. And number 3, we would like you to take much, much quicker steps towards developing a regional common market. Basically, the message that I heard was that as you are developing the regional common market and your borders become, again, quicker to be crossed with controls, with infrastructure, so we shall be also in discussion with the neighboring EU countries to accelerate the move of goods and people across the borders, whether with Hungary, Croatia, Greece, Bulgaria. I have listed the flagship investment initiatives. The first, again, 5 of them would be basically public infrastructure investment with the, again, renewable energy will rely a lot also from private investors. The renovation wave is a program that we hope to be rolling out, scaling up what we have done together with KfW, improving energy efficiency in residential and public buildings. And also digitalization is an infrastructure area. Competitiveness of the private sector will also use the EU guarantee. It's primarily focusing on local SMEs. There is a partnership under Western Balkan Investment Framework. You see who are there. So all these project ideas, they come to this forum to be screened, approved, prepared at an accelerated pace in the coming year or 2 when we want to start implementation. Here you see my own contact details. Don't hesitate to contact me if you are interested in particular investments, but also about economic context in the Western Balkans, business context for you, and also some of the procurement opportunities. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today. And I will hand over to our next speaker, who is joining us from EBRD headquarters in London today. So Kee-Yung is the Associate Director for Infrastructure at the EBRD, and he will introduce us also to EBRD's Green Cities initiative, which has been realized with the support also from the Austrian Ministry of Finance. And there are many promising projects in cities across EBRD countries of operations coming out of this initiative. So we're very interested to learn more about it. And I hand over to Kee-Yung. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm indeed joining from London, sadly not from our headquarters, but from my living room, rather. I will indeed speak about the Green City program, but as a way of introduction and to build on what Zsuzsa said, I'd like to make a few points about what we do in the Western Balkans. I think it's important to underline that EBRD does a lot for the last 30 years in supporting municipalities with delivering services for their populations. And everything I will talk about in the next few minutes is about this, helping cities provide essential services. And the Green City program, which I will present in more details, is the result of this experience that we've built. It is the result of everything we could learn and all the innovations we've done over 30 years. So it's a key pillar of EBRD activity. We did bring, when we started operating almost 30 years ago, something new in the world of multilateral development banks, which was a dedicated team for cities, and it has worked extremely well. We mobilize tools which other IFIs are now working on, other multilateral development banks, but which have proved to be very flexible. And here I'd like to explain what we do a bit more with cities. We do provide different type of financings. We can lend directly to municipalities, which is something which is also quite unique. So we lend directly to the city of Belgrade, for instance, which has been our borrower for a very long time, and which is the largest exposure of EBRD. We have over 250 million euro of exposure on the city of Belgrade. We do work on bonds. This is something which can be relatively complex. We have participated in municipal bond issuances in Romania or in Zagreb as well. And we, as Zsuzsa was saying, we help municipalities mobilize private sector. How do we do that? We help them set up projects as PPPs. So the procurement process is a procurement process which is a lot more sophisticated than classic procurement, and this has been extremely successful in when the conditions are there. And as Zsuzsa mentioned, we are very proud of the Belgrade Solid Waste PPP, which we financed and signed last year. Something important when we speak about cities and we speak about what EBRD does is that we don't only bring the financing, we also help our partners from the local governments or the government level to prepare the projects, and we help them to implement the projects. So this is done through technical assistance, and here, as it was just said, we have to acknowledge the role played by the Austrian government, and I will list later when we go through the Green City program what exactly the Ministry of Finance from Austria has helped doing in our countries. It's an incredible support that we have and that the cities in the Western Balkans especially receive. I was lucky enough to work in Vienna for a while when I was younger. I worked for Dexia Communal Credit. At the time, it was a booming financing institution for local governments. With the 2008 crisis, things went differently. And I think here it's important to acknowledge as well the counter-cyclical role that EBRD plays, especially when it comes to local governments. They are facing a very difficult moment with COVID-19. The resources are heavily reduced, and we are stepping in. We are helping cities like, for instance, in Novi Sad in Serbia to go through this period. A last point as well before I go into the presentation as an introduction. I do work on municipalities, but as Zsuzsa mentioned, I work as well on the transport aspects in the Western Balkans. I will not focus on this now, but we can discuss it during the questions. It's important for us to support connectivity in the Western Balkans. We are part of all the big corridors. We want to do more railways, as it was just said by Zsuzsa, and I was also lucky enough to be in Austria last year for a workshop with several Western Balkan railway companies. We were hosted again by the Austrian government, and it was a fantastic week which showed how much knowledge and expertise there is in Austria. We were all very impressed. We visited several factories, and I think it showed what Austria can do in the Western Balkans. Happy to discuss that a bit further later on. I'll just now go through the focus of the presentation, which is the green cities, and I would start by explaining the background and the reason why we set up this program. So this is a program which was set up in 2015 and 2016. We wanted to take into consideration what were the new trends, the new issues that were consensus for everyone, and these are especially the climate change and the varying populations in the Western Balkans. We see countries where the population is diminishing, and in Eastern Europe in general, and we wanted to tackle as well the life quality issue, which is more and more important for citizens everywhere. And when we speak Western Balkans, we can easily think of the air quality, which led to some demonstrations recently. The warming world, I'm not going to go through this. You've seen these numbers. The increase in frequency and in extreme events is something which is key here to understand, and we all see it, I think. Overall, the impact of cities. So in this overall context, cities have a role to play because they account for 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. As just this number says it all, and that is why we refocused our municipal approach on what we call green cities, on partnership with selected cities to help them tackle the issues I just described. And to give an overview of what this program includes, the basic philosophy behind it is support from EBRD to design what we call a Green City Action Plan, something which is clear, easy to understand, a roadmap for 10 to 15 years about what are the main priorities for a greener city. And this Green City Action Plan is something I will detail a bit later. This is something the Austrian government is supporting a lot. And together with this action plan, we identify a trigger investment, a first investment that we can finance, and that will bring change on the ground for people. We have listed here the different sectors, the municipal sectors we can work on. We'll go through that when we speak about a few examples. And the final point is capacity building. We work on making sure that our counterparts at the municipal level can deliver what the plan is listing. Here it's a few slides about what have been the results. We're proud of it, so I'm sharing it with you. This shows the cities where we have done a Green City Action Plan. When I say we, I mean the city has done a Green City Action Plan with our support, and the cities have approved that Green City Action Plan, and it's usually a municipal council approval. Just to flag a few strong partners in the Western Balkans, Tirana is a very important city for us, where we do a lot, and a lot has been achieved in terms of greening. Skopje, and I can speak a bit more about that later. Banja Luka, I will give an example as well. Sarajevo, Belgrade, Novi Sad. These are all cities where the municipal officials are working with EBRD support and the Austrian support for the action plan in some cases to improve things. These are the numbers: almost 600 million euro of EBRD investment, 1.5 billion of funding mobilized for the projects, the equivalent of almost 150,000 cars of CO2 emission reduction. And then stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is something I will touch base a little bit on later on, because it's very important for us. This is the list of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not going to go through that for too long. It's just to say that we are, of course, working in alignment with the UN SDGs. How do you become a green city? How does it work from a municipal side? So obviously, it has to be in a country where EBRD has a mandate to operate. And with a city which is relatively large, we've put the limit at 100,000 inhabitants. We want to deliver as much impact as possible. So we want cities which have a relatively large scale. And then we do what I described, the Green City Action Plan, and we finance the first project. So this first project, for instance, with the city of Skopje, can be new buses, which are environmentally more efficient. That can be e-buses when we can. That can be something else, which like energy efficiency in public building, like in Chisinau. I will describe that a bit more. And all these investments must achieve a 20% greenhouse gas reduction. The Green Cities process is described here, and it's pretty clear. As I described, we work on something we finance and an action plan on the side. And moving forward, this is also on the GCAP. Some priorities are identified through a baseline assessment. We do discuss with the consultant and the cities what are their indicative investments needs, what are the midterm targets, what is on the long term, what they want to achieve. And here is more details again. You can, the slides will be circulated and you can go through that. But basically, it is a classic urban development planning process focusing on green investments. Policy is also important. As Zsuzsa was saying, it's not only about identifying investments, it's also about identifying what can be changed. And what can be changed when it comes to air pollution, for instance, does go a lot through policies and actions which can be implemented. And here we identify as well with the cities what can be done, and we can mobilize technical assistance when needed to help them implement the changes. These are, for instance, in Tirana, the priorities which were identified and who finances what. I will go through this example a bit later on. As I described at the beginning, we do provide different tools. We can lend directly to the city. We can lend to a private company. That's something we try to push as much as possible. We lend from 2 million to 250 million euro for the projects. So it's from a relatively small to a very large investment. Smart solutions is something we try to promote. To be transparent, it's a constant policy dialogue with the authorities of the countries where we work. It's not always easy to implement change, especially when we're talking about innovative solutions, which are still being tested for most of them, and which sometimes represent a significant investment for the municipalities. This is the number of projects we signed. Same, it will be circulated to you. And a few examples I wanted to go through. Batumi Bus is in Georgia, but here in Chisinau in Moldova, we've done the renovation of public building. It's something we want to build on in the Western Balkans as well, do more renovation of buildings to improve energy efficiency. We have done the Tirana water project, which was about providing more clean water to the citizens. Banja Luka in Bosnia, the amount of greenhouse gas reduction here is impressive. It's I think it's a flagship investment for us in terms of changing the source of fuel, of energy for a district heating company, and this is something we want to do more in the Western Balkans. In Belgrade, we worked on the Green Boulevard. In Bulgaria, we worked on some urban infrastructure as well. Here in Turkey, we've done a metro. This is an example of a very large transaction, and this is something we are able to do as well. So I'm coming to my point about stakeholder engagement. These are a few pictures of our EBRD Green Cities framework and network, where you see people from the EBRD, you see different mayors. This Green City is an occasion to discuss environmental policies at a municipal level, and we push that as much as we can. And this stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned, it is extremely important. We all know, and I mean, I have to underline that Vienna is a key example for everyone when it comes to a green city. We have had several Vienna officials participating in green city workshops. As the experience of Vienna is enlightening, I think, for any municipal team who wants to do better in terms of environment. And what comes out from the experience of Vienna as well is the stakeholder engagement is very important. People need to approve, people need to be on board, people need to be involved in the decision making, so that change is acceptable and can be implemented. And that will be it for me. I just would like to underline that the Austrian government in all this plays a key role, and list maybe the Green City Action Plan that were financed by the Austrian Ministry of Finance. We have Tirana, we have Zenica, we have Banja Luka, we have Pristina, we have then further away Almaty, Chisinau, Amman in Jordan, and in Romania we have Craiova. I think all these cities and the team at EBRD is very thankful for the support brought by the Austrian government, and that will be it for me. Thank you.
So thank you, Kee-Yung. Thank you for this interesting insights into the Green Cities Initiative. Efficient technology is very important when it comes to green transition. And our next speaker, Beata Paucai, she's in charge for the Green Economy Financing Facility of EBRD. And she will introduce to you the Green Technology Selector from EBRD, which is a platform that also received support from Austrian Ministry of Finance, and where companies can sign up their products. So I would like to ask Beata to switch on her microphone. and take over.
Thank you very much, Michal. I would like to thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to present the Green Technology Selector. As mentioned, my name is Bita Peroksai, and I work in the Green Economy Financing Facility Unit within the Energy Efficiency and Climate Change team in the EBRD. Together with colleagues in the Financial Institutions Department, we are implementing the Green Credit Line facilities, and the ones that I'm in charge of are running in the Western Balkans region and also in the EU countries. But specifically in the Western Balkans, the credit lines that I cover are implemented in both the residential and commercial sector. And one thing that is common between them is that they all make use of the Green Technology Selector, which is the topic of my presentation. So I would like to provide an overview of the Green Technology Selector and its key features, explain the benefits it brings to its users, and give a couple of practical examples of how we used it in the Western Balkans. So what is Green Technology Selector? In a nutshell, this is an online digital platform and a mobile app listing green technologies and equipments. As mentioned, it was developed with the generous support of Austria, and it was launched in 2018. One important feature is that the use of this platform is free of charge for all the market participants. The Green Technology Selector is a list of available and eligible technologies which meet the minimum performance requirements set by EBRD. And so they guarantee energy and resource savings in comparison to commonly used technologies. In other words, these technologies that are included in this tool are expected to achieve energy and water saving in the face of climate change-related risks. Right now, as you can see on the slide, there are 15 categories and overall 73 specific technologies that are available. Some of them are relevant for the residential sector, and I will talk a bit more about it later. So these technologies would be in buildings, may they be windows and doors, insulation materials, heating systems, as well as lighting or solar PV. Other technologies are more relevant for the commercial sector, for businesses, and some examples may include process technologies and transport sector products, forklifts, agricultural vehicles, and also commercial electric vehicles. Apart from these technologies, there are also what we call adaptation technologies included. They include the irrigation and sustainable land management technologies, subsoilers, mulchers, drip irrigation lines, and so on, as well as rainwater harvesting tanks. So with these adaptation technologies will improve buyers' resilience in the face, or to be better equipped to tackle the negative impacts they face as a result of climate change. So all in all, there is a broad range of products on the Green Technology Selector, and it is a wide menu to pick from, so to say. This makes this tool especially well placed to serve a diverse and fragmented segment of economy to help deliver green finance at scale. So where are we now in terms of numbers? As of September 2020, there are overall 28,000 products enlisted on this worldwide Green Technology Selector. 1,500 manufacturers are represented, and over 1,000 local technology suppliers, what we call vendors, are registered. The Green Technology Selector is available in 38 countries across 3 continents. Apart from English, it is also available in 40 local languages. All of these items save energy, save water, and reduce soil erosion. The beauty of this tool is that it serves as a global platform that invites global manufacturers and international technology vendors to register themselves and their high-performing technologies, but also financial institutions who may want to use the GTS as an assessment tool. In other words, it matches investors, financiers, and vendors to suppliers of technologies from around the world. And by connecting these important market participants, the aim is to promote global trade and investment in best-in-class green technologies, all in order to help our countries of operations transit into green economy and to contribute to clear-cut savings to tackle climate change. The important point I would like to highlight here is that the list is continuously and very dynamically growing. So we started at the time of launch in 2018, July, we had less than 5,000 technologies listed on the technology selector. And since then, we have grown to nearly 30,000. And so the new products that are continuously added, they are also verified by experienced engineers to ensure the integrity. And the GTS is the largest global database of green technologies that we are aware of. EBRD and the technical experts across local markets review performance requirements for technologies and vendors on the regular basis and reflect market developments. Governed by both EBRD and local experts, we focus on technologies that not only result in impact, but also are available on the market with multiple suppliers, as the case may be. The products enlisted on the Green Technology Selector go beyond prevailing standards for each of the country. And out of these products, 1,100 are manufactured by 46 Austrian companies. I thought it would be interesting to give you a flavor that there are already Austrian companies registered on the Green Technology Selector. These companies are ranging from Bramag to Hertz, also Wayland Group Austria. We operate under the more the merrier principle, and we hope to grow this number even further. And to support the uptake of green technologies, EBRD is leveraging a large network of financial institutions, not only through green credit lines, which I will talk about a little bit more further, but also through another EBRD flagship program, which is called the Trade Facilitation Program. This is to promote international trade and the export and import of green technologies in our countries of operations. A bit about the background and history of the Green Technology Selector for additional context. Initially, this tool was developed under the Green Economy Financing Facilities as a tool that helps in identifying technologies eligible for EBRD financing. So Green Economy Financing Facilities, Zsuzsa mentioned them, in brief, we call them GEFs, are EBRD credit lines provided to partner financial institutions for on-lending to businesses and homeowners who wish to invest in green technologies. All in all, GEF program operates through a network of over 145 local financial institutions across 27 countries, ranging from Mongolia to Morocco. GEF so far provided more than 4.6 billion of financing, which in turn supported 190,000 clients on their green journey. We have started from GEFs, and we have also went through a certain level of mainstreaming to go global by launching the Green Technology Selector platform in 2018. And since its launch, these best-in-class technologies from around the world led to clear-cut efficiency gains and serve as a basis for market-specific green technology selectors. And here, since I already talked about the gaps, I wanted to give you a couple of examples. The first example is a facility, GAP Western Balkans, which operates in the residential sector. This framework is one of the core elements of the Regional Energy Efficiency Program for the Western Balkans, which is supported by the EU, Austria, and also SSF, and is implemented in partnership with Energy Community Secretariat. This RE-product reflects the EBRD's business model of combining policy dialogue, technical assistance, and financing facilities blended with investment grants by targeting a range of sectors and project types. It's an 85 million framework, of which 71.5 million has already been signed by 16 PFIs across 5 Western Balkans countries. The financing under this program is available to individuals, housing associations, service providers, as well as vendors and producers for investing in green technologies from the technology selector. The average investment size is roughly 5,000 euros, which means that there is a huge number of sub-projects with very small amounts. And so far since the start, and we had a slow start, but after the slow start, what we have financed is 5,100 sub-projects that were 27 million. They all invested in pre-approved technologies from this list. And what we have right now is on the list is 20,000 residential eligible technologies that are available through more than 5,000 vendors across these countries. And the demand is continuous. We will migrate, because this program was launched before we launched the Green Technology Selector. The selector under this program is working in a parallel system, but all the products and the vendors will be migrated onto the global platform of Green Technology Selector this year. Another example is from the commercial sector. This is a leasing facility that is running in Serbia only and is supported by Green Climate Fund. The focus of this facility is leasable technologies. It's a smaller facility, currently only available through 1 participating financial institutions. And we support businesses, vendors, and producers under this credit line. In as little as 9 months, there have been 107 projects financed worth over 7 million euros. And the technology selector already contains close to 1,000 leasable technologies. Of course, these mainly include construction materials, forklifts, excavators, agri and machinery, and also commercial electric vehicles. So in a little time, this credit line available under this program is already halfway through utilization. So Green Technology Selector creates straightforward green investment opportunities among financial institutions, their clients, and also the technology suppliers. Manufacturers and vendors register themselves and their product. Financial institutions will have access to a large list of products, and buyers, and beneficiaries of these technologies will know where to get the technologies from, because there is a list of vendors who are linked to these products. So in this sense, the Green Technology Selector increases visibility of technologies for straightforward green finance opportunities. And not only that, it also accelerates deployment of high-performance technologies and can reach tens of thousands of businesses and households across the countries where it operates. Last but not least, it activates a local network of technology providers, as explained. A bit more on the benefits. For our partner financial institutions, the Green Technology Selector saves transaction cost and time. Now, compared to the scenario where each and every individual investment, green investment, has to be assessed by engineers and technical experts, that would take a good couple of days. Instead of this, PFIs will know that the products on GTS, the Green Technology Selector, are straight away eligible. There is a function in the selector where this can be evidenced by generating the so-called eligibility certificate. This is an evidence that this product is on the list and is eligible for EBRD financing. Due to this efficiency, partner banks can grow their green finance portfolio straight away. And through this tool, they can also maybe identify cross-selling opportunities as well as build sales partnership with vendors. And for vendors and manufacturers, registering their products is simple, user-friendly, and system-guided process. There's a dedicated vendor info page and the frequently asked questions to support them during the process. They can register their shop and link their products to their shop. There are, as mentioned, many products already listed on the GTS, so they can find the product and link their shop to it, or if their product is not yet on the list, they can register it in a simple couple of steps way. And if the product meets the minimum performance criteria, they will be made available on this global Green Technology Selector. Some of the benefits that would be of interest for vendors and manufacturers. So registering their product may be opening new marketing and distribution channel, and can increase sales of green technologies and also brand awareness. They can reconfirm the performance and quality of their products. They can also identify additional products to offer or import to expand their product range. And last but not least, they can also engage with and enter into strategic partnership with financial institutions who offer green finance even beyond EBRD finance, as well as with listed global manufacturers and or local vendors. And I included this slide in the presentation, but I'm not going to show. These are two videos demoing both the application, which is available for Android as well as iPhones, and the website. So these are two demo videos for further distribution and interest. So as a last note, we all have heard about the EU Green Deal and the EU Sustainable Finance Initiatives that determine the direction for transition. And we believe that the Green Technology Selector can assist both partner banks and their clients, as well as vendors and manufacturers, to deliver on the climate agenda and the green agenda. And this is some contact details. If you have any questions, there's the email address and another link to the website. And this is the end of my presentation. I'm handing back to Michal.
Thank you, Beata. Thank you for your presentation. We have received some questions, which I would like to ask now to you, Beata, and to your colleague, which is also with us. So it's a very specific question, 2 parts. Part 1 concerning irrigation. Are there smart metering devices considered to preserve, allocate, or manage water resources eligible? And the second question concerning cooling. Are cooling projects with cooling meters considered to preserve efficient and mindful use of water resources?
So yeah, I understand. Okay. We do have the 73 technology types on the list, but this doesn't mean that this is set in stone and is fixed. So even if right now smart cooling is not included on the list, we are constantly looking at the products and with the view to enlist them and grow the number of technologies. And smart technologies are definitely in our interest. And with regards to the irrigation, I'm sorry, what was the question specific to the irrigation technology?
If smart metering devices for irrigation are also considered a means of enhancing the sustainability and efficient use of water.
So this may not right now or currently be on the green technology selector, but it can be considered eligible as an auxiliary investment that is integral to deliver the irrigation project.
Okay, thank you, Beata. We have received the final question for Kee-Yung. The EBRD focuses on cities and projects with more than 100,000 people per city. In the Western Balkans, there are many cities which have no infrastructure, a lot of pollution and other problems. So the question is, are investments in smaller cities with less than 100,000 participants not profitable, or why is EBRD having such a cap?
So the cap is a little bit as for if you look at what we do with SMEs. The reason is that under a certain amount of investment, EBRD is not equipped as an organization to deal with smaller requests, if you want. We have resident offices which are able to interact for large investments and with a certain number of counterparts, but as opposed to a commercial bank, for instance, which has a local presence, which is a lot larger, we're not equipped to deal directly with smaller municipalities. What we've done in the past, we had set up a municipal development fund a few years ago to target smaller municipalities through local banks. We worked as well on several initiatives with smaller municipalities, but which would be outside the Green City Action Plan, and which would lead to similar results, if you want, but which for which we will need a significant amount of investment. So the issue here is again, our intervention can work for large projects, and so we find it more difficult when the investment is too small, as we have a limited number of staff.
Thank you, Kee-Yung. We have received more questions, but we have come to the end of this webinar, so we will pick up on those questions which haven't been answered now via email. So I would like to thank again our speakers from EBRD who joined us today not only from headquarters in London, but also from the regional offices in Belgrade. I would also mention our next events, which we're doing together with IFIs. So there will be a webinar together with the World Bank on trends and reform in the Tibet sector on the 29th of October. And as was mentioned by the colleagues from the Asian Development Bank, there is a special business opportunities webinar by ADB on COVID-19. We are having our Africa Day on the 5th of November. You're happy to join this, as well as the International Mobility Days, which we're organizing and where we have a lot of experts from the Western Balkans region joining as well. If you want to stay connected with us, please also join our LinkedIn group, Austria at IFIs, where we build a network of Austrians working at development banks and Austrian companies. I hope that today's webinar was interesting for you. Thank you for attending.